They say life's a journey, and mine sure started on a bumpy road. My folks, Jane and Robert, were the kind that knew the grind all too well. They didn't have much in the way of fancy degrees or fat wallets, but they had hearts of gold and a dream for me bigger than the sky. Dream big, work hard, Zoya, Dad would say every morning as he tied his worn-out boots, ready for another day at the factory. Mom, with her gentle smile, would pack my lunch, her hands rough from years of juggling odd jobs. I was their golden ticket, their dream of a better life, and they poured every penny they could spare into a jar labeled her future. It wasn't just loose change, it was their sweat, their hope, and their love, all clinking together in that old glass jar. High school was where the rubber met the road. I hit the books hard, determined not to let my folks down. Evenings were a family affair, with Mom quizzing me on my homework and Dad sharing stories about the value of every hard-earned dollar. Then came the letter that changed everything. A thick, fancy envelope with the words admission confirmed printed on the front. I'd made it into one of the top colleges to study financial analysis. The joy in our little house was palpable. Mom cried, Dad hugged me so tight I thought I might break, and that night, we had a celebration dinner, nothing fancy, just our favorite stew, but it tasted like victory. College life was a whole new world. I was a small fish in a big pond now, but I wasn't about to float, I was there to swim. To keep afloat financially, I started tutoring. It was during one of these sessions that I met Mike. He was a bit rough around the edges, always had his cap on backward, and seemed more interested in cracking jokes than cracking books. You know, you'd learn faster if you stopped trying to make me laugh all the time, I chided him during one of our sessions. Mike just grinned, that lopsided grin that I'd soon learn to love. And you'd be less stressed if you laughed a bit more. Balance, you know? Our study sessions soon turned into long conversations, laughter, and eventually, something more. He was different from anyone I'd ever met, he had this way of looking at life, unfiltered, unpretentious, just real. But life's not just about the good times, is it? It's about the grind, the hustle, the unending push to keep moving forward. That's what my parents taught me, and that's what I was determined to do, Mike by my side or not. Life after college was like stepping onto a whole new playing field. I landed a gig at a top firm right off the bat. All those nights hitting the books paid off, and I was ready to roll up my sleeves and dive into the world of finance. It was all high rises, sharp suits, and numbers that made your head spin. And let me tell you, it felt good. Real good. Mike, on the other hand, he was treading water. Jobs for him were like buses, you miss one, and you're waiting ages for the next. When he finally landed something, it was clear his paycheck wasn't gonna stack up against mine. At first, it hung in the air like a bad smell. Mike would come home, his pride a little bruised, and I'd be there, trying to lighten the mood. Hey, it's not about who brings in what, I'd say, slinging an arm around him as we sat down to some takeout after a long day. We're a team, right? Yeah, a team, he'd mumble, but the crease in his brow told me he wasn't buying it. But as time ticked by, we settled into our rhythm. Our love wasn't about who paid for dinner or who had the fancier job title. It was about those quiet nights in, the laughter that filled our tiny apartment, and the dreams we whispered to each other in the dark. We tied the knot one summer's day. Nothing fancy, just a bunch of our closest friends and family, a local band, and a whole lot of love. It felt like the world was ours, and nothing could touch us. Can you believe it? Mrs. and Mr., Mike said, his arm slung around my shoulder as we watched the sun dip below the horizon, the party winding down around us. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of the moment wrap around us. Believe it? I've been waiting for it, I teased, and we both laughed, the sound mingling with the soft clinking of glasses and the distant murmur of conversations. Life was good, even if it wasn't always easy. We had our share of bumps, like any couple. Bills piled up, and sometimes the end of the month had us digging deep into the couch cushions looking for spare change. But we made it work. Mike's job, well, it wasn't what he dreamt of, but it paid the bills, and he found joy in the little things. Like the way he'd come home, a grin spread across his face, holding some cheap trinket he found at a thrift store, claiming it was a treasure. "Look at this, Zoya," he'd chuckle, holding up a lamp that looked like it had seen better days. "It's got character." I'd roll my eyes, but inside, I loved that about him. He could find the silver lining in a storm cloud. Then there were nights when the weight of it all would press down on us. Nights when Mike would stare out the window, a cold cup of coffee in his hands, his thoughts a million miles away. "You ever think about where we're headed?" he'd ask, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd sit beside him, our shoulders touching, sharing the burden. "All the time. But I know wherever it is, we're headed there together." And he'd nod, the ghost of a smile crossing his lips, and that was enough. It had to be. We were just two kids from the block, trying to make a life together. We had love, we had dreams, and we had each other. And back then, that felt like enough. Stability's a funny thing, you know? One minute you're on top of the world, and the next, it's like the rug's been pulled out from under you. That's what happened to us. My fancy job, the one I thought was rock solid, crumbled like a house of cards. The day it all went down, I remember walking into the office like any other Monday. But the air was different, tense, like a storm was about to hit. And boy, did it hit. The boss called us into the conference room, his face ashen, words stumbling over each other. "Bankruptcy," he said. That one word echoed in my ears, a death knell to all our dreams. I came home that night, my mind a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Mike was there, sprawled on the couch, a game flickering on the TV. He looked up, saw my face, and immediately knew. "What's wrong, babe?" His voice was calm, but his eyes were searching, worried. I just stood there, the words stuck in my throat. "Job's gone. The company's bankrupt." For a moment, there was just silence, the kind that screams louder than any shout. Then Mike was on his feet, his hands on my shoulders. "Hey, Zoya, look at me. We'll figure this out, okay? You're the smartest person I know. If anyone can bounce back, it's you." But the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Rejection after rejection piled up, each one a reminder of the failure that seemed to cling to my name. The industry was cruel, unforgiving. "We respect your credentials, but..." That but cut deeper each time. Mike did what he could, his paycheck barely enough to keep us afloat. But I saw the strain in his eyes, the way his smile didn't quite reach them anymore. One evening, I found him at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a bad hand of cards. He didn't hear me come in, just kept muttering to himself, numbers and curses tangled up. "Mike?" He looked up, his face drawn, tired. "How did we get here, huh? Used to be we worried about what takeout to get, now it's about which bill can wait till next month." I sat down, took his hand. "We knew life wasn't gonna be a straight road, right? We've hit a bump, a big one, but we'll get over it. Together." Mike shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "Together? Look at us. You're jobless, and I'm barely scraping by. This isn't what we signed up for." His words stung, a slap of reality I wasn't ready for. "So what, you're saying I'm not trying? You think I like being stuck here, useless?" "No, that's not what I mean." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched in every line of his face. "It's just hard, you know? Feels like no matter how hard I paddle, we're sinking." I wanted to say something, anything, to fix it, to make the hurt in his eyes go away. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, we sat there, together yet miles apart, the weight of our crumbling world pressing down on us. Betrayal, they say, cuts deeper than a knife. It's a wound that festers, a poison that spreads until everything you once held dear is tainted. That's what it felt like when Mike turned on me. It started with snide remarks, little jabs here and there. At first, I tried to brush it off, chalk it up to stress, to the pressure we were both under. But as the days dragged on, those jabs turned into full-blown attacks. Another day, another stack of rejection letters, huh? Mike's voice was harsh, nothing like the warm tones I fell in love with. I looked up from the pile of envelopes on the table, my heart sinking. I'm trying, Mike. You know I am. He snorted, a cold, mocking sound. Trying? What good is trying if it gets us nowhere? You know how much I'm stretching every dollar to keep us afloat here? I felt the sting of his words, the unfairness of it all burning in my chest. You think I don't know that? You think I like sitting here, feeling like a burden? A burden? Well, if the shoe fits. His words were a slap in the face, a confirmation of my worst fears. I stood up, my hands shaking. I can't believe this. After all we've been through, this is how you talk to me? Mike's face was hard, unyielding. Face it, we're sinking and you're just dead weight. I'm done carrying you. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of Mike's words haunting the silence. I thought about everything we had been through, all the dreams we had shared. And I realized that the man lying next to me, the man I had built my life with, was a stranger to me now. The final blow came a few days later. I came home to find Mike in the living room, but he wasn't alone. The woman with him was young, too young, with a smirk that made my blood boil. Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence, Mike sneered as I stood frozen in the doorway. The woman giggled, a high, grating sound. Is this the famous wife? The one who can't hold down a job? I felt the room spin, my heart pounding in my ears. Mike, what is this? Mike stood up, his eyes cold. This is me moving on. I'm done with you, with this sham of a marriage. He threw a stack of papers at me, the word divorce glaring up at me in bold letters. Consider this your eviction notice too. I want you out. I looked from the papers to Mike, to the woman still smirking on the couch. I was numb, the pain too deep, too raw to comprehend. Without a word, I grabbed my coat and my bag, the life I had known slipping through my fingers like sand. Life has a funny way of kicking you when you're down, but it's also got a knack for throwing you a lifeline just when you're about to sink. That's what happened to me the day I wandered into Linda's salon, a place I used to frequent back in my better days. My mind was a mess, my heart in pieces. I must have looked a sight, sitting there on one of those plush chairs, staring blankly at the mirror, seeing a stranger looking back. Linda, with her keen eyes and kind heart, must have seen the storm brewing inside me. She approached, her step soft, her voice gentle. Honey, you look like you could use a friend, she said, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I looked up, met her gaze in the mirror, and before I knew it, the floodgates opened. Words poured out, raw and unfiltered, the story of my downfall, my betrayal, my brokenness. Linda listened, really listened, her nods and soft murmurs a balm to my battered soul. When I finally fell silent, she gave my hand a squeeze. You know, Zoya, she started, her tone thoughtful, I've been looking for someone to help me manage this place. Business is good, but it's getting too much for just me to handle. I blinked, her words not quite registering. Me? Manage a salon? But I'm a financial analyst, or at least, I was. I know nothing about running a beauty salon. Linda chuckled, a warm, rich sound. Oh, honey, skills can be taught, learned. But character, grit, determination, now those are things you either have or you don't. And you, my dear, have them in spades. I stared at her, the offer sinking in. It was crazy, totally left field. Me, running a salon? But then, what did I have to lose? My career was in tatters, my personal life a disaster. I don't know what to say, Linda. I stammered, my mind racing. Say you'll think about it, she suggested, her smile reassuring. No pressure. But I've got a good feeling about this, about you. And hey, it comes with a place to stay. The apartment upstairs is vacant, and I'd be happy to cut you a deal on the rent. I was floored. A job and a place to stay? It was more than I could have hoped for in my darkest hour. It was a chance, a lifeline, a glimmer of hope in the endless night. Linda, thank you. I'll think about it, I promise. I managed to say, my voice thick with unshed tears. She gave my hand another squeeze. Take your time, honey. But remember, sometimes the best opportunities are the ones we never saw coming. I left the salon that day with a lighter heart than I'd had in months. The road ahead was uncertain, scary even. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this fight. Starting over ain't easy, especially when you're building from scratch. But sometimes, life gives you a second shot, and you've just gotta grab it with both hands. That's what I did at Linda's salon. It was a world away from the high-flying finance scene, but it had its own rhythm, its own pulse. And before long, I found myself getting into the groove of it. Linda was more than a boss, she was a mentor, a friend. She showed me the ropes, from managing bookings to handling the most colorful of clients. I threw myself into the work, letting it consume me, heal me. One day, after closing, we sat down, a couple of cold drinks in hand, going over the accounts. The numbers were looking good, better than good. You've got a real knack for this, you know, Linda said, her eyes sparkling with pride. I shrugged, a small smile playing on my lips. Guess I've always been good with numbers. And people. She nodded, taking a sip of her drink. It's more than that. You've got vision, drive. You've turned this place around. Heck, you're pulling in clients like I've never seen before. I chuckled, the sound surprising even to myself. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. I just figured, why not try something new? What did we have to lose? Linda's smile widened. That's the spirit. And speaking of trying something new, I've been thinking. The way she trailed off, that twinkle in her eye, I knew she was onto something big. Out with it, Linda. What's cooking in that brain of yours? She leaned in, her voice dropping to an excited whisper. Expansion. This place is just the start. I'm thinking a chain, a brand. And I want you in on it. As a partner. The words hit me like a bolt of lightning. A partner. Me. After everything that had crumbled, here was a chance to build something new, something mine. Linda, are you sure? That's a huge step. She nodded, her gaze steady. I've never been sure of anything. You're not just rebuilding your life, you're helping me build my dream. We're a team, and together, we're unstoppable. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of her words sink in. This was it, a new chapter, a new beginning. From the ashes of my old life, here I was, rising, stronger, fiercer. All right, Linda. Let's do it. Let's build something amazing together. And we did. We worked hard, turning one salon into a chain of salons. Each new opening was a victory, a testament to our grit, our partnership. We were more than just a business, we were a force, a brand that stood for resilience, for beauty, for empowerment. Looking back, I couldn't believe how far I'd come. From the depths of despair to the heights of success. It wasn't just about the salons, the money, the recognition. It was about finding myself, my strength, my worth. The warm, inviting atmosphere of the salon buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving streets outside. I was there, in my element, wrapping up Mrs. Jenkins' hairdo, her laughter mingling with the soft tunes playing in the background. The salon, my pride and joy, was more than just a business, it was a sanctuary, a testament to my journey. Mrs. Jenkins, with her sharp wit and warm heart, was in the middle of one of her famous anecdotes when the door burst open, sending a draft through the room. The chatter dipped into silence as Mike, my past mistake, walked in, swagger in his step, that same arrogant girl from years ago, clinging to his arm. His laughter, loud and mocking, sliced through the calm. What's this? Zoya? The high-flying financial whiz turned scissor-happy hairdresser? The girl with him, all smug smiles and judgmental glances, chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. Really hit rock bottom, haven't you? From boardroom to this, quaint little salon. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. I felt Mrs. Jenkins' grip tighten around my hand, her presence a silent pillar of strength. Without missing a beat, Mrs. Jenkins rose from her chair, her stature small, but her presence enormous. "You listen here, you ignorant fool. This woman, this hair snipper as you call her, she owns this place. Not just this one, but a whole chain of them. She's been in the papers, recognized as one of the most successful entrepreneurs around." Mike's smirk wavered, his companion's laughter faltering into an awkward silence. Mrs. Jenkins leaned in, her voice a fierce whisper that filled the room. "And you, I've seen you, parading around town, always a drink in hand, always on the brink of another shambles. It's you who's the embarrassment, not her. You're the one tossed from job to job like a rag doll." The salon was still, the air thick with tension. Mike, once towering with arrogance, now seemed smaller, his bravado fading under the weight of truth. He tried to interject, a weak "Now, listen here," barely leaving his lips, before I cut him off. "Mike, your time here is done. You chose to walk out of my life, and that's where you'll stay. Out. You're not welcome here, not in my business, not in my life." His eyes met mine, a flurry of emotions passing through them, anger, shame, maybe a hint of regret. But it was too late. I had moved on, built a new life from the ashes of his betrayal. The girl with him, her confidence now a crumbled facade, tugged at his arm. "Let's go, Mike. This is pointless." They turned to leave, their exit as dramatic as their entrance, the door closing with a soft click behind them. The salon erupted into applause, a chorus of support and solidarity, Mrs. Jenkins leading the charge. She turned to me, her eyes softening. "You, my dear, are the epitome of grace and strength. Don't you ever forget that." The room slowly returned to its rhythm, the incident fading into just another story to tell. I looked around, my heart swelling with pride. These walls, these people, were a part of my story, a narrative of resilience, of rebirth. After the door closed on that chapter of my life, the salon, my sanctuary, felt even more like a haven. Linda, ever the pillar of strength and wisdom, sidled up to me as I was tidying up for the day. Her smile was as warm as the sunshine peeking through the windows. "You did good today, real good," she said, her eyes twinkling with a mix of pride and mischief. I chuckled, shaking my head. "Good? I feel like I just went 10 rounds in the ring." "Ah, but you came out on top. That's what counts," she insisted, giving me a gentle nudge. "And speaking of coming out on top, I've been thinking." That tone, that look in her eye, I knew it well. It meant Linda had another one of her grand ideas, the kind that had turned this salon from a dream into an empire. I leaned on the counter, my curiosity piqued. "Out with it then. What's brewing in that brilliant mind of yours?" She leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Expansion is great, we've nailed that. But what about branching out even more? I'm talking product lines, training academies, maybe even a reality show. Sky's the limit." The idea was bold, daunting, and utterly thrilling. The thought of turning our brand into something even bigger, touching more lives, igniting more dreams, it set my heart racing. "Linda, that's huge," I stammered, the magnitude of her vision dawning on me. "You really think we can pull it off?" She scoffed, playfully swatting my arm. "Think? Zoya, I know we can. Haven't we proved that already? We're a dynamite team. With your brains and my charm, we're unstoppable." Her confidence was infectious. I felt it, that familiar flare of excitement, the spark that had ignited my journey from the ashes of my past life. "All right, Linda. Let's do it. Let's shake things up and see where we land." Her grin was all the answer I needed. We were in this together, ready to take on the world, one dream at a time. As the salon emptied and the lights dimmed, I took a moment to reflect. Life had thrown curveballs, heartache, and challenges my way. But it had also brought me friendships, triumphs, and a future bright with possibilities. I locked the door, the click echoing in the quiet street. The night was still, the stars overhead a silent chorus of witnesses to my resolve. Tomorrow was a new day, a new chapter. And I was ready for it, ready for the challenges, the adventures, the highs and lows. Ready to build, to dream, to soar.